Okay, fantastic, thanks. Well, thanks again, and it's good to be back doing this session. Thanks all for coming along. And the first thing I want to say is that we're very aware that there'll be different levels of knowledge and understanding about UNCRC in the group today. Some of you might know quite a lot and some of you might be very, very new to that. That's fine. But we just want to make it clear we're not trying to teach our granny to suck eggs. So we're aware also that the conversation, the wider conversation about UNCRC is fairly recent. So lots of people are just getting their head around this and thinking about what does it actually mean in practice for our public bodies and also for children and families on the ground. Children's Parliament's been on the go now for 26 years, and we've used the UNCRC framework for most of that time. And as I go through the presentation, I just want to say at the beginning that we make a great effort to work with children who would not normally be selected for in-school or out-of-school projects. So we work with lots of children who come from challenging backgrounds, who have struggles in school with behaviour or with friendship, who have low self-esteem and confidence, who might struggle to even attend school, because we believe that showing that a rights-based approach works for those children means that it works for all children. So you can just be aware of that as we're going through the slides. So this is worth waiting for, folks. Eleanor Roosevelt she has a wonderful depth of a library of quotes. This one, for me, sums up everything that we're talking about today. And what she said was, "Where, after all, do universal human rights begin? In small places close to home, so close and so small that they cannot be seen on any maps of the world. Yet they're the world of the individual person, the neighbourhood he lives in, the school or college he attends, the factory, farm or office where he works. Such are the places where every man, woman and child seeks equal justice, equal opportunity, equal dignity without discrimination." And critically, unless these rights have meaning there, they have little meaning anywhere. So we can talk about children's rights. You hear children's rights language used a lot now. The conversation's fairly recent, but it's becoming more and more common to hear the language used. But actually what we need to think about is, what does it mean? Is it making a difference in the lives of children and families? Next one, please, Felicia. Somebody who I have long admired and studied is a Polish Jewish teacher, educator, who was Janusz Korczak. He ran an orphanage in Warsaw in the ghetto in the Second World War for Jewish children, and ended up going to Treblinka with them to the death camp where they all perished. He was given the right of freedom. He was offered freedom because of his standing, and people knew about his work. And he refused it because he said, "We're all equal. I'm not any more equal than these children, and if that's where they're going, I'm going with them." His work has influenced the development of children's rights agenda over many years. And in 1919, he wrote a children's rights manifesto. And I'm just going to go through a few bullet points with it. But when I do, I'd like you to think about, this was written over 100 years ago. So while we're reading these bullet points, think about, what difference have we made since then? Are things any different to how they were in 1919? Next slide, please. The child has a right to love. Love the child, not just your own. The child has a right to mistakes. There are no more fools among children than among adults. The child has a right to forgiveness. More often than not, we are the harsh judges rather than their counsellors and consolers. The child has a right to education. One is struck by the fact that everywhere military spending is greater than that for education. And the last one, the child has a right to respect for his grief, even though it be for the loss of a pebble. That one gets me every time. It's about recognising children are we, but their feelings and their experiences are not smaller than or of less value than ours are because we're adults. And that expectation that children are equals and have equal rights, equal space, equal voice is something that most of us need to think harder about. Next one, please. So I would argue that the situation that children are in at the moment is moral luck. They are in a position where they are dependent and relying on adults getting it, and adults being willing to put their human rights at the heart of everything they do. So if you're choosing a new school, for example, families are thinking, children are thinking, oh, what's the head teacher going to be like in this school? Is it going to be fun? Is it going to be friendly? Is there going to be punishment? Is my dignity going to be upheld? They're not sure at the moment because, to be honest, there's quite a range of experiences, which Maxine will touch on later. And the next slide, please. And part of the reason I think that we're kind of stalling on the children's rights conversations and implementation sometimes is a feeling that children's rights go too far. And in fact, children's rights can't go too far. If they've gone too far, they're not children's rights anymore because they've gone beyond what keeps children safe and happy and healthy, because that's the entirety of what children's human rights approach is meant to do. Next slide, please. So it's not about children. Children's rights doesn't mean children get to do whatever they want, whenever they want. They're not allowed to cause riots. They're not allowed to be unfriendly. They're not allowed to hurt other people. They're not allowed to discriminate against other people. And next slide, please. At Children's Parliament, as I said at the beginning, we work with children from all backgrounds and abilities. These slides are from the Western Isles, where we worked from North Uist down to Barrow over a number of years. And if you notice the photographs, the children are very engaged, it's very creative. They've got positive relationships with adults, which is what we start with in the first place. The next slide, please. Recognising that for some children, when they come along to environments like this, which are very creative, where children are expected to take a level of responsibility, to make decisions, that can be quite scary. Most children come from environments where adults are telling them what to do all the time. And we understand that in order to thrive in the world, to make the most of life's opportunities, you have to be able to have a level of confidence, of agency, to know where to go, to know when to speak up if things are not going well. When your rights are being breached, you have to know what that means in order that you can do something about it. So next slide, please. So all these experiences that children have, this is Climate Change Bill in 2007 when the children took it to Brussels. Next slide, please. All these experiences mean that children have a time to find themselves in this process, to understand who they are, to build their confidence, to understand a subject that they want to talk about really deeply. And that means that when they get into more formal situations, like this one with Mr. Swinney and Councillor Dickey, they're able to have conversations directly themselves. They don't need us as adults to mediate for them. So my colleagues are sitting at the table for reassurance for the children, if the children want to ask a question or need a wee prompt, but the children have the conversation and answer the questions that Mr. Swinney asks of them. Next slide, please. And this one is the children in a project that we did with Together and Juliet, actually in United Nations in Geneva. These are all children who were referred through our East Lothian project, and through a process of working together, of creating these shields, the giant ones and the wee ones, they were able to go to Geneva to speak at main sessions, to co-moderate. Hannah was the first child to co-moderate a session at the United Nations. You know, people were blown away by what they were able to achieve, and so were their families and their teachers, because I think oftentimes we have such low expectations of children, especially children who struggle for any reason in their lives, that people were astonished that the children were able to achieve this level of agency and input that got such amazing feedback from folk around the world at the UN. Next slide, please, Felicia. So the presentation is called Hearts and Minds, Winning Hearts and Minds, because that's what we really need to be doing, and that's what we need your help with. And hopefully you'll be able to pick out some things during the presentations that will help you to have some of the conversations with colleagues that might be challenging, but when people get on this page, they really get it, and you will find that they will be really strong allies for what you're trying to do in improving children's lives in local communities. Next slide, please. So we have, when I'm working with adults, if I'm doing training, for example, I'll often say, just empty your heads, get everything out of what you do already. What do you do and how do you do it? And next slide, please. And then think about, what do you want to put back in place using the UNCR as a framework? So measure what you're doing against the UNCRC, and that will keep you right. And it will allow you to have conversations as teams that all start from the same place, not from our own individual initiatives or interests. The UNCRC provides a really clear, beautiful framework, actually, for what we need to have in place to support children as they grow. And next slide, please. so that at the end of that process, what you have is, and this next illustration is a school, can we move on, Felicia? Is it working? Nope, it's doing something fancy in the first place. So we have, in this one, it's a school. My colleague Stuart drew this, so that you have an environment, a place, a health clinic, a school, a social work department, where children's human rights are in everybody's heart and everybody's mind. So that means the Janny, the children, the wider community, teachers, PSAs, parents, carers, everybody. And if that's in place as your framework, as your building blocks, all the other things that we talk about, we hear people talking about through all our public bodies, about trauma-informed practice, nurture, well-being, poverty, ACEs, all of it is there because the UNCRC takes care of all that. Next slide, please. So having UNCRC removes children's dependence on moral luck. They can be reassured that they're going to be treated equally, that their human dignity is going to be at the heart of everything that we do with and for them, and that will lead to children developing confidence, self-esteem, agency, and really importantly, being invested in themselves and what they're doing. So they're not doing this, they're not part of a process, part of a school, part of a class, because adults are telling them to do it. They understand why they're there, and they want to be there because they understand the bigger picture. And we're just finally, the next couple of slides, please. A nest of fearties is what they do not want, as part of Edmund Morgan's poem at the opening of the Scottish Parliament. And we have devised a new word. We've created a new word, and it's an unfearty. And an unfearty is an adult who's willing to stand up for and alongside children, childhood, and children's rights. If we just keep moving on now, Felicia, please. So fear is obviously a Scottish word for brave, and unfearty is somebody who's brave. And we have now just under 2,000 unfearties in Scotland. And this is reflecting Mr. Swinney's pledge when he introduced the bill first time round to the Scottish Parliament for UNCRC incorporation, that it's about everyday accountability. This is about us getting it right for children, whether they're at home, at school, or in the community, all the time. So if any of you are not unfearties yet, would like to know more about unfearties, please go onto the bit.ly web link or go on Children's Parliament website, and I hope to see some new names popping up as unfearties.